Morning, everyone. Morning. Thank you for coming. So I don't know if you noticed, we have a new name. Did we notice that? We've had a pretty colorful reaction to it, which is good, which is what we hope for, because we're different now. And I actually quite like it. I don't know if you like it or not, but what I do want is I want you to be impressed with what we can do with it. The business has changed a lot in the last 10 years, and it's going to change a lot more in the next 10. And I'm going to spend the next hour telling you how. Before we start that conversation, for those of you who I haven't met yet, I am Jay Schwan. I've been with St. Ives for almost 4 years now. I was introduced to the group in March of 2015 when St. Ives purchased a company I founded in 2001 called Solstice. It's a company I started living above a Chinese restaurant on Wells Street in Chicago. And over the last 10 years, Solstice has grown at a roughly 24% CAGR, and it's grown at 25% CAGR in the 3 years since St. Ives bought it. Solstice is roughly 400 employees now and did about 50 million pounds in revenue last year. The main reason for that success is I had a good idea and I was blessed with a great team. And thankfully, that team is continuing to do a great job running the firm today. If you're curious how we delivered that performance, I'll point you to my favorite Winston Churchill quote, which is, "You can always count on Americans to do the right thing after they've tried everything else." We tried a lot of things at Solstice, and many of the successful things that we tried have influenced the strategy that I'm going to go through with you today. But before I do, I'd like to hand you over to our CFO, Brad Gray, and he's going to take you through our performance for the last 12 months, a performance which has given us a great platform for the road ahead. So, Brad.
Thank you. So I'm very pleased to present a very solid set of results for Kin & Carta this morning. I'm going to run through some key highlights of the year. So the first one is we disposed of the books and marketing activation segments for £32 million. We've also restructured the continuing brands, and they're now aligned to the new strategy. We've got organic revenue growth of 11%, and our profits are up 38%. Operating profit margins have increased from 10 to 12%, and net debt has been halved to £26 million. And we've also got a new revolving credit facility in place of £85 million. And that runs through to November 2022. Consists of 3 banks, HSBC, which was an existing lender, but also 2 new banks are supporting us, Bank of Ireland and Fifth Third. And the pension scheme has moved into surplus. So moving on to the income statement, which is for continuing operations. So this excludes the books and marketing activation segments. As I said earlier, revenue is up 11%, £16 million. You'll notice on there that we've got a large adjusting item of £50 million, which I'll cover on the next slide. And that has led to a statutory loss of £31 million. What's not on here is our effective tax rate on the adjusting position, which for 2018 was 20%, and going forward it will be around 19.5%. We're proposing a final dividend of 1.3 pence, which will make a total dividend of 1.95 pence for the year. So moving on to the adjusting items of £50 million, the largest item on there is £27 million, which relates to acquisitions, and that's made up of 2 components. So there's contingent consideration treated as remuneration, which is £24 million, which is split between Solstice and TAB. So £3 million Solstice and £21 million relating to TAB. And then we've also got an increase in deferred consideration of £3 million that relates to TAB. We impaired the goodwill and intangibles of Hive in the year, which accounts for £12 million, and then we've got amortization of acquired intangibles that basically relate to acquisitions of £8.7 million. And then a net figure of £1.7 million, which includes restructuring items, property sale, and also the pension scheme. Moving on to the cash flow, a really good, strong cash flow in the year, starting off on the left-hand side with adjusted EBITDA of £25 million. We've had a working capital inflow of £4.6 million. On a normal go-forward basis, as we continue to grow, I'd expect a cash outflow of working capital of £1 to £2 million. Tax and interest, tax of £4 million, and interest of 2.8. CapEx, slightly higher than we had anticipated. We've conducted quite a lot of refurbishments during the year. I'd expect that to drop in 2019 to between £2.5 million to £3 million, because we've got some of the costs of the refurbishment flowing into 2019. Go forward, about circa £2 million of CapEx. The deferred consideration of £16.5 million relates to TAB and Solstice, so £4 million for TAB and 12 for Solstice. Moving on, the pension scheme payment of £6.6 million includes the £2.5 million that we paid to the pension scheme as a result of the disposal of the books business, and the property sale on there relates to a property we had in Bath that our Response One business occupied, and we merged a number of businesses and we were able to sell the property that they previously occupied. The balance sheet, there have been some significant movements on the balance sheet as a result of the disposals. So the fixed assets, it now includes an investment property of £4.2 million, which is the building that Clays operates from. That's our previous books business. The largest item on the balance sheet is goodwill and intangibles, which is acquisition driven. You'll also note that we've got an asset held for sale on there at £5.3 million. That's a property, a warehouse in Redditch, that was previously occupied by SP, our point of sale business that we sold in the year. The pension scheme moved into surplus. This was largely as a result of an increase in discount rates and also some experience adjustments. Net debt to EBITDA is 1.1 times. At the end of 2019, we're looking, as a result of the deferred consideration, we're looking around 1.5 times. And the deferred consideration sitting on the balance sheet is Solstice and TAB. There's £3 million relating to Solstice, and the balance of £18 million relates to TAB. Of that, I'd expect £2 million to flow into 2020. And then just to give you an overview of the group, we've got 1,500 employees across 11 offices on 4 continents. And the balance of our capabilities, which is on this left-hand diagram, is pretty good. So we've got a pretty good split between strategy, innovation, and communication that Jay will go into in more details later on. And also, I'd like to highlight the importance of the US to us now. So our revenue split between EMEA and the US is 64% EMEA and 36% in the US. And what we're also starting to do now is analyze our revenue by sector, because we've got some specific concentrations and specific skill sets. And we've identified 5 key areas, which are shown on the right-hand diagram, between financial services, retail and distribution, industrials, transport and health. So going forward, we're going to be monitoring and directing our resources into those sectors. And at that point, I'll hand back to Jay.
Thanks, Brad. So I'd like to give you the cliff notes here of the story that we're going to talk about today. It's about a new company with critical mass in a rapidly growing market, and we'll talk about that market. It's a company with strategy, innovation, and communication capabilities to compete with the biggest players in the space. It's a company that's big enough to matter, with the agility to create a differentiating proposition, and we'll talk about that proposition. It's a company with a highly driven and energized leadership team, and it's a company with a scalable business model with clearly defined opportunities for growth. So we're going to go through that over the course of the next 25 minutes. So just to expand on what Brad talked you through in terms of where we are, as most of you know, I came over in January as the group's first Chief Digital Officer. And it gave me an opportunity to perform a strategic review on our businesses. And this is a summary of what I found. Sorry, I'll click here. The highlights here are we've got 1,500 digital specialists with a proven track record with good clients, big clients. We've got a market where digital is no longer a marketing issue, it's a business imperative. We're going to discuss that in a second because it's impacting every area of the business, not just marketing now. We've got an opportunity to join up our collective capabilities into a holistic proposition that our clients are already asking for. And we also have some really great capabilities here in the UK that we have yet to bring to the US market where we're already working with some of the biggest companies in the world. So we have a lot of strengths in a big market with a lot of opportunity. These are our businesses. You'll notice that we're moving to a hierarchical brand structure in order to tie all of their identities together. And the centers of gravity of these different businesses are across 3 pillars that we're going to be talking quite a bit about today. Strategy, which is helping clients understand how the market is shifting with digital impact and where they should play and how they could win. Innovation, which is about building new products and services, new offerings for clients. So helping companies come up with those new digitally driven offerings. And communication, which essentially is marketing, helping companies figure out who to talk to, how to get attention of digital audiences and convert them into customers. We also have a ventures arm, which are essentially businesses that have been incubated out of entrepreneurs within the group. And we've had a lot of success with these 3 ventures, and we'll talk more about those in the future and how we're looking to formalize that model to create more opportunities for the entrepreneurs within the group and allow us to experiment in the market. But today we're really going to focus on our 3 core pillars of strategy, innovation, and communication. This is our client base. So Brad mentioned that we're going to be focusing on 5 key sectors going forward. These are the sectors where we have a significant amount of strength really being driven by the experience in our strategic consultancies, where we have a lot of knowledge about how these businesses are run. And there are also sectors that are getting disrupted by a lot of the digital changes that are happening in the market. And you'll notice that we're working with some of the most recognizable brands in those sectors, and we're doing meaningful work with these companies. And I'll give you a few examples of that in a moment. First, I'd like to talk to you for a few moments about our market. This is one of my favorite quotes of recent times. It was actually a quote by a guy named Graham Wood, he's an Australian strategy guy down there. His actual quote was, "Change has never happened this fast before and will never be this slow again." I think the latter part of that is what's most inspiring, and it's true, and this is why. Digital technologies continue to change the way we work and we live. The time that we're spending on screens, our phones, our tablets, our computers, has nearly doubled in the last 7 years, from 3.2 hours a day to 5.9 hours a day on average. That's probably not too surprising for many of us, especially for those of us who have kids. But in parallel to that, the value of a Facebook user has more than doubled in the last 3 years. And what does that mean? That means that brands are willing to pay nearly twice as much to get your attention online. And why is that? Because in the last year, over 60% of consumer transactions have happened online. It's where we're buying a majority of our products and services now, from groceries to automobiles. And so we're spending more time online. The value of that time is considered more valuable because we're buying more things online. And so none of this is probably too surprising, but these are some of the numbers to kind of support, I think, what we're all experiencing in our day-to-day lives. And digital is not done evolving. I think this is an important thing to remember. Many argue that it's just getting started. New technologies continue to emerge. Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum and the underlying technology of the blockchain continue to gain traction. Computers can now understand human speech better than a human can. That's what that 95% is. That's the threshold we reached last year. That's creating new ways for brands to interact with their customers, like voice and messaging. This is where you see the rise of technologies like Amazon's Alexa, and as Siri gets more mature. But also messaging applications, being able to chat with a brand and have a computer respond on the other side. We're already doing meaningful work in those areas for some of the largest companies in the world. But one of the things to keep in mind is the foundational technologies of digital. Most of them are being driven out of the large US public technology companies, Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon. And their R&D spend as a percentage of revenue is 18%, meaning 18% of the revenue they're making is going into creating new technologies for consumers to use. And so the market is going to continue to evolve rapidly. And this, by the way, is up from 13% 10 years ago. So they're increasing their investment in these new technologies, so the tech will continue to come and the consumer behavior will continue to change with it. So what does that mean for businesses? It means that companies have to adapt in order to remain relevant. When we talk about digital strategy, it's no longer a marketing function, it's a business imperative. From an innovation standpoint, many businesses are now creating digitally driven services to differentiate their historic core offerings. As an example, Visa has hired our brands Insight and Tab to work together to find new digital offerings like digital finance tools for small businesses as more payments move from plastic to online. Dow DuPont is spending millions with us each year to build digital tools for farmers in support of them selling more seeds. So companies have to think about their core digital offerings in addition to what they've historically sold. And marketing is also getting harder. Acquisition costs are rising, which we saw in that Facebook example that I gave you on the last slide. But in addition to that, another interesting trend is that the cost of products online are falling relative to inflation. So when a product moves online to be sold, it actually gets cheaper. And that's not too surprising because we essentially are democratizing the sale of that product. So margins for companies are getting squeezed. It's more expensive to get a customer and they're selling products for less than they used to. And that's challenging a lot of those existing business models. So from a marketing standpoint, what's customer lifetime value, keeping customers, is incredibly important. And companies have a hard time keeping customers' attention in a world that's full of distractions. And so they need help. To give you one example, our brand Edit built a platform for RAC that pulls the data from their trucks and sends a monthly Fitbit-style email to their fleet customers about the health of their fleet, just to keep them engaged with the brand, just to lock in that next renewal. And this last piece, transformation, is frankly the hardest part. The reality is consumer expectations aren't driven by our clients' competitors. They're driven by our consumers' last great experience with Uber and Amazon and Monzo. Consumers expect the experience with a brand to evolve at the same pace as those tech companies, and if not, they'll go somewhere else. And that means that companies have to fundamentally organize themselves and work differently, and that's really hard for them to do on their own. When you put all these things together, the opportunity or the problem is digital transformation. Digital transformation is a rewrite, grounded in new technology of a company's market strategy, its offerings, and its ways of working. When we talk about digital transformation, it's not just for Silicon Valley companies or startups. It's a way of life for organizations expecting to survive in the next decade. And it's made up of these three core pillars: strategy, innovation, and communication. The name of the game these days is not scale, it's speed. This is not our term. This is a large and growing market. The digital transformation market this year is estimated to be $200 billion globally. And of that, $44 billion is in services, which is where we play. And this market is growing at 18.5% and is expected to reach $462 billion by 2024. So this is not our term. This is a large and growing market that already exists, and it's a market that we're already in. 80% of our services that we've provided in FY18 are in this digital transformation sector. And as these budgets continue to increase, it's unclear which service providers are best equipped to help. These are three categories of our competitors. The agency networks, who you are most likely familiar with, have a great marketing-focused proposition. But the problem with most of the agency networks is they're still treating this as a marketing problem, and it's bigger than that. It's a business problem. And so their vision has been somewhat siloed in terms of what area of the business that they're focused on. And because of that limited thinking, the consultants have come in. And so the Accentures and the Deloittes of the world have snapped up digital marketing capabilities in the market and have created a holistic proposition for businesses across marketing and product and strategy, and businesses like it. They like that holistic proposition because that's the problem that they're having. The problem with the big consultants is they have a hard time keeping talent. The best talent in the digital market doesn't want to go work for a firm that helps a company digitally transform and does their taxes. They like to work in specialist boutiques, to be frank. They like to be surrounded by other people who appreciate their craft, that can help evolve it, that can be known, help them be known as thought leaders. And so the specialists are actually attracting the best talent in the market. The problem with the specialists is they can only solve one piece of the puzzle. And if a client is going to go with a quote-unquote best-of-breed solution, then they've got to stitch all those specialists together. And many of them are not very good at that. It's hard to do that. So this is the market that we're working in, and that has created an opening. And that's the opening that we are looking to fill. This is our new operating model. We call it the connective. We've questioned the strengths and the weaknesses of the servicing models that exist today that I just talked you through, and we've organized ourselves to deliver on what we feel the future needs. Here's what you need to know. We have three core capability pillars: strategy, innovation, and communication. All three of those pillars work together to help our clients transform. Our clients are at the center of our offering. The way that we work, the red thread that ties those three capabilities together, is what we call connected customer experiences. That's our methodology. That is how we've systematized the way that our companies work together on behalf of our clients. This model allows our specialists to work in the boutiques that they prefer, but it joins them up to provide clients a holistic proposition. It also gives them career pathways both inside and across the specialisms. I could spend a lot of time today on how the connective is working, as we've been operating this way for almost 9 months now since I came over here, but I'd like to spend some time at the half year showing you the fruits of this, and we'll spend more detail talking about it then. But there's three reasons why I want, or I guess one of the questions that you might have is, how is this different than a network? And the answer to that question, first and foremost, is it's real. There are three things that I think are important to understand as it relates to this model. We've had over 200 people across the 7 businesses working together to define and execute this model across every area of the business. So it's very much a bottom-up proposition, and those folks are the ones who came up with this. It wasn't me. We have everyone in the group on the same communication and collaboration systems now. Our 7 CEOs are talking every day. We're sharing resources across company. Employees are already moving across the different companies, and we're already generating revenue from companies like Civilized Bank, AppV, Rockwell, Gallagher, dunnhumby, and QuickFit. This is all work where multiple agencies have come together to sell new projects that we simply would not have had a year ago. It is early days for this. So I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we still have a lot of work to do. But I'm really excited about the support that we have across the Connective and the traction that we're already gaining in these early market tests. So that is our new operating model. The fundamentals, which are here. Carta gives clients the holistic digital transformation that they need while giving our people the culture, the career opportunities, and the training that they deserve. So I'd like to go through a couple examples of some work that we're already doing to help hopefully crystallize in your mind the types of projects that we're executing on in this space. I'm going to put this in context of the 3 core pillars that I've mentioned to you before. So strategy is where we help our clients better understand the shifts that are happening in their market and helping them recognize the potential that digital can bring across new offerings and new ways of communicating with their customers. Rockwell Automation is a great example. This is a $22 billion global industrial automation company. Their CEO, Blake Murray, sponsored this digital transformation program. And it came to the surface where, one, they realized they had over 54 different digital properties they were asking their customers to interact with. So 54 different front doors to their business, depending on if they're trying to place an order, reorder something, ask for maintenance, or support. And one of the best stories coming out of one of their boardroom conversations is when their head of marketing stood up and said that they heard from one of their customers that they could go on Amazon.com and buy a $1.50 toothbrush and know exactly where it is and exactly when it was going to reach their home. But they would order hundreds of thousands of dollars of industrial automation equipment from Rockwell and had no idea where it was and no idea when it was coming. And Blake said that has to change. So we went in with a customer-centric strategy and analyzed the entire business and came up with a new vision, a new digital front door to the company called My Rockwell, collapsing 54 digital properties into one, migrating 400,000 customers onto this new platform, which has recently rolled out to great reception. And for some color on this, this was a $400,000 initial strategy engagement that has led to a 7-figure, multi-year digital transformation program that we continue to execute on. This is a great example of how strategy drives digital transformation. On the innovation front, this is really about using emerging technologies to help companies come up with new ways of servicing their customers. What are the new products and experiences they can give their customers to help amplify what they already sell? You're all probably familiar with this brand. Steve Rowe, who's Marks & Spencer CEO, said, "We seek to become a digital-first retailer, grow market share, and change our digital behaviors, mindsets, and culture." This is common with all the retailers that we're working with. Pay and Go came on the heels of Amazon announcing its launch of Amazon Go stores, where you could walk into a store, pick up anything off the shelf, and walk out. Pay and Go essentially allows you to do the same thing. You can take an item off the shelf, you can scan it with your phone, pay on your phone, and leave without ever standing in a queue or visiting a till. This used to be called shoplifting. but not anymore. Our specialist brand Tab helped M&S with this. M&S actually cited Tab in their recent press release announcing this new capability, which rarely happens. We are helping Tesco, B&Q, Maplin, and many others with similar frictionless tech experiences. And this is a great example of digital innovation. On the communications front, this is really where marketing sits. It's about combining human creativity and a lot of the new technologies like machine learning to find new digital audiences and convert them into lifelong advocates. So paid media, social media strategy, search engine marketing, web design and build, multi-channel commerce all sits in this communication pillar. There's a lot of creativity that's needed to come up with the ideas needed to get attention online, and we've got some great creatives within the group. AutoTrader is a great example of a already digital business, but they still need help on the comms front. They've been a longtime customer of ours, and they wanted to raise awareness of their new car offering, and they came to us for help. And here's what we came up with. During the World Cup, you may have heard about this campaign, but during the World Cup, every time England scored, AutoTrader would give away a new car. And to enter the drawing to win that new car, you just had to tweet hashtag AutoTrader goals on Twitter, and it worked. Hashtag AutoTrader goals trended to the top 10 on Twitter during World Cup games, and you might have seen this campaign mentioned in the news as the campaign went viral because England started to do so well, which not everyone anticipated them to do as well as they did, score quite as many goals and go quite as far into the tournament. So a lot of folks were joking about the fact that AutoTrader made a bad decision because they were having to purchase all those new cars. Of course, AutoTrader was eating up the attention. Our folks at Amaze Realize even created a mock video of their miserable finance director rooting for Colombia in hopes that England would stop scoring goals. This boosted their brand following by 7% and their search engine rankings for new car from number 8 to number 1. So there's some great creative talent here in our communications function. And so for our last example, I want to talk about a transformation story. And this is really about integrating these capabilities and, more importantly, helping companies change the way they work. Because it's not a one-and-done proposition when you have this onslaught of new technologies and new channels that keep coming. Companies have to be more agile and have to achieve speed in order to thwart ongoing competitors. And this is a great example of that. Gordon Food Service excuse me, is a $15 billion commercial food distributor, the largest private food distributor in North America. It's a B2B business, so they distribute food to grocery stores and restaurants. And their CEO sponsored their digital transformation after Amazon purchased Whole Foods. And the reason why is because they realized that Amazon's move from consumer groceries into the B2B food distribution space was not far behind. The problem was, not only did they have a poor digital experience for their existing customers, but their current processes for updating that ordering system allowed them 4 releases a year. And that pace would never allow them to keep up, much less compete with the impending new competition. So Kin and Carta helped them create a next generation global B2B ordering system in less than 9 months, but more importantly, increase their speed of digital software releases from 4 times a year to 11 times a day. And that is the pace that's needed to compete. This is an ongoing 7-figure annual run rate project with roadmaps well into 2020. So those are some examples of the type of work that we're doing and the type of work that we're targeting going forward. And what I'd like to, so we've covered so far, just to kind of recap where we are, our strategy, and the work that we've done. And I just want to spend our last few minutes talking about how we're going to do it and how we're going to measure ourselves. This is our business model. It's relatively simple. If you start at the top and move to the right, we're focusing on top-line compounded annual growth rate in line with the double-digit market expansion for digital transformation services. We're focused on double-digit operating profit margins, allowing for some significant medium-term investments to accelerate that top-line growth. We'll use our cash flow for balance sheet strengthening, facilitating growth investments, and ultimately additional shareholder returns. And the growth investments, which I'll talk to you about in detail in a moment, are going to be focused on opening new regions, expanding digital capabilities as they evolve, and developing new partnerships. In terms of guidance, here's some near-term financial targets. We are going to make a £2 million investment in this first year, and I'll talk to you in a little bit more detail about where that's going to go. To be frank, we could do this over the next couple years, but it's pretty clear to me what we need to do, and we're going to get on with it, and we're going to do it. So this year, we're targeting mid-single-digit revenue growth as we mobilize our connective offering and operating margins above 10%. Next year, we're looking to expand to double-digit revenue growth and targeting operating margins greater than 12%. We'll be managing net debt to EBITDA at 1x, as Brad mentioned, from the end of FY20 onwards. So those are some targets that you can that we're committing to guiding to. And in terms of growth catalysts and our £2 million investment, the growth catalysts really fall into two broad areas. One, as I mentioned, we've uncovered a multiple of additional opportunities to create leverage with the assets that we already have. And we need to put those together and make sure the market knows about them. So one piece is scaling our sales function, which I'll talk about in more detail in a moment, as well as deepening our sector focus, which Brad mentioned, and really focusing on some key sectors where we see the most opportunity instead of trying to be everything to everybody. And the other theme is around expanding these capabilities in the reach. So the top is the engine, the bottom is the fuel. The fuel is adding new capabilities and new ventures, like our artificial intelligence practice we started last year. We'll be scaling that this year. We've got a lot of great traction in that space. That's a combined proposition across Solstice, Edit, and Amaze Realize. And then, of course, geographic expansion. There's a lot of opportunity globally. A lot of this work is happening locally because it needs to be very close to the end customer in order to be effective. So regional expansion will be important. So let's talk about a couple of these in more detail to give you some color. In terms of scaling our sales function, sales is really about best practice sharing. We've got some rapidly growing firms in the group, some others that have underinvested in sales. We're going to ensure that those best practices are shared and rolled out across our different specialist brands. We're forming a newly formed centralized inside sales function to increase top of the funnel activity. We're building sales capabilities at the center to facilitate the sale of these larger connective propositions that'll span across our specialist brands. And of course, we'll be increasing the marketing of Carta. As you guys probably have seen, when you go to kinandcarta.com, it is very much a commercial brand now. It's not just an investment brand. It will be even more of an employer brand as we move forward, as that is the game, is to attract and retain the best talent. And so we need to make sure that we're supporting that. The second piece is partnerships. I mentioned earlier that the digital transformation market is roughly $200 billion in size. Services make up 44 of that. The other $150 billion is software and infrastructure. And those software companies are selling to the same buyers that we are. So we need to formalize and expand our partnership capability and allow us to co-market and co-sell with those other folks in the digital transformation space. So that'll be part of the investment. And the third, industry rankings as many of you are probably aware, there's a whole analyst industry around the digital transformation market. Companies like Gartner and Forrester that create lists of vendors in this space that our buyers use to determine who to ask to compete on new work, to who to send RFPs to. When you go talk to those folks as 7 different 200-person brands, it's not quite as effective as when you go talk to them as a 1,500-person digital transformation consultancy. So we'll be combining our analyst relation efforts there in hopes to increase our industry rankings and, of course, spur even more top of the funnel activity. So that is a bulk of where the £2 million investment will go to start creating those flywheels at the center that don't exist today. In terms of deepening the sector focus, this is a snapshot for you to understand where we have strengths across our 3 pillars in each of these key sectors for us, and it really outlines where we see opportunity to grow our existing capabilities into sectors that we're already in. So we are mobilizing as a group around those opportunities and will be going forward. And this list of sectors may expand in the future, but for the time being, we're going to focus on these 5 key sectors. And then in terms of geographic expansion, there's some near-term opportunities for us to move our communication function, which is here in the UK, to the US, where it doesn't exist today. In the US, we do have strong innovation, strategy, and transformation capabilities. Our clients over there are asking for the communication capabilities, so we already have started making moves to move Amaze Realize capabilities to the US and bringing those to our Solstice clients that already exist. And we're also moving those same capabilities into Buenos Aires, which is one of our lower cost delivery centers, so we can offer that delivery capability globally, lower cost delivery capability globally. Asia is in our sights, but it's not on our near-term roadmap. Right now, we need to play to our strengths. We will be dragged there by our clients, but we do not need to go there in the near term to hit our goals. From an acquisition standpoint, our next acquisition will most likely be somewhere on the West Coast or Southern United States, and we're focusing at looking at innovation firms at substantial scale, as we believe that is the fastest growing part of the market and a key area of strength for us. And so just a few more notes on acquisitions. It is part of our strategy. It'll most likely be an FY20 move for us, but that hasn't stopped Brad and I from starting that process now. We're looking at larger regional acquisitions that I mentioned, £50 million plus revenue, and we're focusing on targets that are on strategy, so that will increase our ability to cross-sell our connective capabilities bidirectionally. And I'm not going to delude ourselves, and we know we'll be competing with these businesses with some great companies, but we are a nimble and a young company, and I believe strongly that the entrepreneurial culture that's supported by the non-hierarchical connective structure that we're adopting is going to be very appealing to the opportunities that we've identified. And as I mentioned, we've already started that process. I'm a big fan of big, hairy, audacious goals. This is something that we have used at Solstice for many years and something that we're using internally here. And this is meant to communicate to our people what we believe is possible. And I believe this is possible. And the BAG isn't just fanfare. We use this structure to break down 2-year goals for the business, 1-year goals, and ultimately quarterly rocks that we need to achieve in order to hit this aspirational target. So I just want you to know how focused we are internally at taking advantage of the opportunity that we see before us. I think I've shown you that quote. It definitely applies to us as much as it does to the market. And so in summary, Carta has critical mass in a large and rapidly growing market. We're a new company with the strategy, innovation, and communication capabilities to compete with the biggest players. We are big enough to matter with the agility to create a differentiating proposition, the connective. We have a highly driven, aligned, and energized leadership team and a scalable business model with clearly defined opportunities for growth. And with that, we will turn it over for questions for Brad and I, and anything else you'd like some more clarity on. Yes, Steve.
Do you have a mic or just shout? Do you have a mic or just
No, just shout it out. We'll repeat it for the...
All right. Okay, can I have three, please? One is, you talked about what you're not in terms of the buckets. Is there anyone out there that we can say is what you want to be, you know, the sort of best in class, to give us a clue on that? That's the first question. The second question is, within your description of the business, I get the agility as a differentiator, but is there a sort of special source in terms of the agencies that you've got that people in the industry would say, these are the standout businesses within this group? My gut feel is it's probably Solstice and Tab, but just try and sort of bring that alive for us. Mm-hmm. And then the third thing is, looking at the like-for-like growth, constant currency growth in the year, obviously you had a very, very strong first half, second half was weaker. Can you just go through, again, the reasons for that, and also talk about the volatility in the business? Because, you know, it sort of scares me slightly that you had the first half, second half the way you did, and if the business changes, does that change, or where we are on that sort of side, please?
Okay. So 3 questions. So the first one was around the best, some comparable best-in-class firms. So something that we looked at quite a bit, and really what we're talking about being is a mid-size consultancy focused in the digital space. And in terms of mid-size consultancies focused in the digital space, there aren't a lot of comparables on the London Stock Exchange, but if you look globally, some similar businesses would be Proficient in the US, and they're traded on the US exchanges. And EPAM is another business that is what I would consider a mid-sized digital consultancy, has more of a global offering, but again, traded in the States. So those are I would say two examples of firms that we think have the right model, and that we would put in our competitor class. Your second question around kind of where's the magic in the group as it exists today? Where are the standout agencies, as you called it? I have been, in the last 9 months, I've been incredibly impressed with the talent that we have across all the different businesses. What I think we have to look at is, as it relates to digital transformation, what is the fastest growing part of that market? And it's really in the innovation space. Because digital marketing is important and it's new and it'll continue to evolve, but it's been out there for a while. Thinking about companies reimagining the products and services they offer to their customers, and the capability you have to build to help them with that, the engineering and the design and the product skill sets that are needed, that's a tough business to build. And we have 2 very good businesses in that space, which is Solstice and Tab. So we think innovation is one of our key areas of strength, and we'll be leading with that from an acquisition standpoint and from a proposition standpoint. But again, all 3 pieces of that puzzle are really needed when it comes to creating an offering for the client. So hopefully that helps clarify that second question. The third question, Brad, do you want to talk about the first half versus second half? And then I can talk a little bit about the growth patterns.
Yeah. So I think there are a number of factors that have been going on in the second half. And what we've been doing and focusing on in the second half is getting the continuing businesses aligned so that we can deliver this new strategy. So there's a lot been going on there. We've merged a number of the businesses together, both in terms of their operations and also their locations. So there's been a very strong focus on that. We've also had the impacts of GDPR, and I think we're seeing the bottom of that now. So clients have been trying to work out what to do from a marketing spend as a result of GDPR. And also within our healthcare business, we're looking at pivoting that business, and Jay can expand some more on that. So, we need to change their proposition, move it more into line with the strategy going forward. So, that's why our second half performance was not as good as the first half performance.
And I guess the other commentary I'll add to that is we are still a relatively small company that works with big clients, and that has great long-term growth potential. And that growth is going to be chunky at times, and it is. And that is a reality of the business, but it also points to the long-term opportunity. So we are going to do our best to guide around that, but I want to be transparent that the best solution to that chunky growth problem is to grow, and that's why we have such a strong focus on growing. Yes, Jonathan.
Morning, Jonathan Barrett from Singers. I've got a few questions in different areas. First of all, just on the clients that you help and how you help them at their different stages of development. You've given us some examples where clients were needing, if you like, early stage help, where they were a mess and needed you to consolidate and organise their digital operations to start with. And then you talked about, I think, Auto Trader was one of the best examples, where you have, they're very much what you could call a digital native for the fact that obviously they did well once a paper publication, but they are digital experts. So would regard them in that way. How much do you think you'll get from, in terms of growth from those two different pots? If you like, the people who are starting out needing your early stage skills, and the others who need your more sort of mature enhancements.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question was, what types of customers, or where do we see growth coming in terms of customers that are, are just in earnest, just getting started with their holistic digital strategy versus ones that maybe have been operating at it for a while. And it'll be pretty evenly split to be clear, and somewhat dependent on the industry. So when we talk about industrials and agriculture, the reason that's a core focus for us is that B2B sector, for the most part, is really just getting started and understanding they have to offer the same level of digital experience to their customers as consumer companies do, because at the end of the day, it's the same people. And so those expectations now have translated from the consumer world to the B2B world. And so many of those companies are just getting started, and we have, and that's why it will continue to be an area of focus for us. Other sectors, like financial services, I mean, a financial service company are digital companies. At the end of the day, their products are all very similar. The way that they compete is on the experience they provide their customers, and most of that experience now is provided digitally, or at least augmented through the digitally with the personal relationships they have. But they have to continue to innovate in order to differentiate themselves. So even though most of the clients we have in that financial service space have been hammering on digital for a while, we still see that as a great growth area for us, because they're looking for, continue to look for outside help. Healthcare is another one that is more around the just getting started phase. And as Brad mentioned, our Hive business, one of the things I realized coming in is they have some phenomenal health strategists in there that understand the business of healthcare and patient journeys and how that all works, but they're selling the wrong things. They're selling lower value communications work. We're pivoting those strategists and those creatives to focus on these broader digital customer experience problems, and that's where, and we've already had some great early indications of success there by joining up those Hive healthcare specialists with our digital marketing and innovation experts. And so healthcare is one of those growing areas. So we'll see a pretty even split behind what I would consider incumbent digital companies and companies that are just starting along the journey.
And then my other two questions, just on the sectors, in terms of the chunk outside of the 5 key areas, there's like the 17%. Are there any areas within that we should be thinking that's one for the future, where you've already got, I don't know, 5 or 6% of your revenues coming from somewhere, and you think, when we've done got these 5, right, we'll or step those ones up a bit?
We're watching the energy sector very closely because we've seen some early success in there without quote unquote trying. But because if you think about it from an energy perspective, customer experience is becoming more of a differentiator in terms of how those companies sell their services and service their customers, and so we're seeing more investment by that sector, even though it's lagging. So there's potential that could surface as a key sector. I don't know if you have any other thoughts.
We've looked at sort of leisure side, so some of the leisure is in there, but yeah, it's not a key focus for us at the moment.
Okay. And just that last question, just on margin. Obviously, you've given us clear guidance for 19 and 20. How should we think about the operational gearing effect on margin going beyond 20? Are you a 12 to 13% business, 14 to 15, or is there something better than that out there?
I think at the moment we'll keep it at what we've guided to, so at 12%. Clearly we've got ambition, and you're right, there would be some operational gearing, but we want to continue to invest in the business to get it to grow. So we're comfortable with the guidance that we've given.
Yes.
Ben Tafer at Arden. Thanks, Jay. That was a fascinating presentation. A couple of questions, if I may. Trade valuations. Are your targets demanding textile valuations? Because they know they're in the hot space for everything you've just demonstrated to us. And just to put that in context, if you were trying to buy Solstice today, do you think you could buy it at a similar valuation to what Brad and Matt paid for it? So that's the first question. And the second question is, have you noticed any decision-making hesitancy around Brexit?
Do you want to take the valuation question?
Yeah, so I mean, we're at very early stages, so we're re-engaging with the people that we previously engaged with. So I think it's probably too early to say where valuations are at the moment, because I think most of the companies that we would look to buy are not publicly quoted companies. And I think going forward, because we'd want to integrate those businesses, our structures are going to have to be different to what we've done in the past. So we've had some earn-out periods, which I think will be more difficult going forwards. So it's not a direct answer to your question, but I don't believe that the valuations have significantly increased over what we paid in the past, and we paid a maximum of 8 times, albeit there have been earn-outs. Yeah. Could we buy Solstice at the same price? I don't know is the answer to that. We struck a deal which both sides found acceptable. Yeah. And it wasn't solely about the price as well. It was about our proposition to Jay and his team. He could comment on whether he got a higher offer for it, and why he actually joined us.
No, yeah, and we had the proposition's important, and there's aspects of that we're trying to keep alive and that connect it. We think is important. Valuations, anecdotally haven't strayed that much in the last 3 years, and so we believe strongly that the acquisitions we make will be accretive, even the larger ones that we're targeting. And so that'll be our focus.
And I think the reason that all of the acquisitions came to us was that they didn't want to go to the large agencies. They wanted to come to St Ives, as it was, and now going forward, Kin and Carta. We haven't seen any real impact as yet. So the answer is no. There are clearly, I don't think anybody's got the answer to it. Nobody really knows. So, yeah.
And we have not seen a slowdown in spending directly attributed to it as of yet. But our investment in diversifying into the Americas is part of that, our mitigation strategy there.
And yeah, we're clearly monitoring the situation, and it's a constant board topic as to what the potential implications are.
Do you think that's because business transformation is not a short-term issue and they've got to get on with it? Is that?
That's very true. Yeah, it is when we talk about digital transformation being a fundamental business issue, Brexit or no Brexit, companies have to figure it out. Yeah.
Hi. Can you add a little bit more colour to quite how the connective works in terms of, is it a centralised idea which has devolved? I mean, talking about additional centralised sales functions, or is it more collegiate or pushed out from the centre? I quite understand the role of what's happening centrally there.
Yeah. So their question was a little bit more detail on how the connective operating model works, and I do want to spend a lot more time with you guys at the next time we get together to show you some of the mechanics of this. But to give you a little bit of the sausage making, the way that we operate internally and externally is slightly different. The way that we operate internally in terms of how do we evolve the proposition, how do we evolve the business, we borrowed elements from an organizational model called holacracy, and that is it's in its purest form. It's a little crazy. There's no bosses. It's very very distributed in terms of how the organization's run. But we borrowed elements of it in scaling Solstice that were really effective, and it really involves creating kind of a virtual organizational structure on top of the physical one, where you bring people together that are in common disciplines into something called circles. And so we have circles across the connective that are made up of, for example, there's a recruiting circle, and all the recruiters from all the different businesses are in that circle. And they decide what elements of their job are they going to share in terms of tools and technologies and process, what elements do they feel need to be specific in the business, how are they going to share resources, how are they going to help amplify the talent brand. Similarly, there's another circle for the finance directors, and there's another circle for the marketing folks, and there's another circle for all of our strategists that are tasked with our client proposition and evolving that. And so when I talk about over 200 people working together to evolve this model, that's what it looks like. We've put everybody in the entire group onto a collaboration platform called Slack. And so this allows all of those circles to communicate with each other in real time. And it's been a phenomenal success. Those circles set goals for themselves for the year, for the quarter, and they evolve the business, and it's very bottom up in terms of how they work together. And so we have some light structure in the center to facilitate those circles and what they're working on, but that essentially is how we're operating internally, and that'll continue to evolve. Externally, we have a separate group that looks at how we actually cast, as we call it, of client projects. So when we have an opportunity come in, we determine who from the connective should work on selling that opportunity, and then ultimately who from the connective should work on delivering that opportunity. And they use that CCX methodology I mentioned in terms of how they deliver to clients. So it is systematized in terms of how we actually deliver. And again, we're on version 1.0 of that. It'll evolve as the opportunities continue to come. But we feel good. We've got a good framework in place now, internally and externally. So we'll go into more details on how that's all working. But I guess the thing I want to emphasize to you, it's not just a marketing exercise. It's not some BS consulting diagram. I mean, it is real how we're working together, and it's really been inspiring. Other questions? Yes.
Maybe two from me. When you were going through the case studies, you sort of mentioned how a project gone from 400,000 and then it's gone up to a seven-figure sort of repeatable business. Can you talk about visibility and how that's improving as the customer relationships are evolving, and also a little bit about customer concentration and sort of what your top 10 are versus overall revenues, etc.?
Yeah, great question. So will this proposition improve our revenue visibility? It will. I mean, the whole idea behind the connective is that we're going to be selling larger deals. So we are measuring things like our average client spend and average project size. and expect those metrics to continue to increase as we roll out the connective. So we have ways of measuring that internally, which should translate into better revenue visibility going forward. So that is part of the spirit of why we're doing what we're doing, in addition to just having bigger problems for our people to solve, which is what they're looking for. In terms of client concentration, Brad, do you want to talk about how that's shifted over the last couple of years?
We have spread our client concentration, so that's been one of our goals over the last couple of years, to make sure that we've got a better spread of clients. So our top client is roughly 5% of revenue. Those top 10 are delivering about 30% of revenue.
So as we grow, we'll continue to watch that concentration decrease, but yeah, that's where we are now.
What would have that been then previously, 2-3 years ago?
On the continuing business, the top of my head, it was probably more like 40-45%, those top clients.
So the top 10.
Yeah. So now if you go down to the top 30 clients, our top 30 clients, it kicks in, they're spending more than £1 million. So those top 30 clients are spending more than £1 million.
General from Williams from Medicine. Just to go back to this business of the building of the revenue base, would you typically expect to have an initial project that would have a limited scope and then to be building business by identifying further opportunities for that client? And is that how it accelerates? And then how, on the back of that, do you manage the resourcing, given that there is a limited pool of talent to bring in either on a staff basis or a freelance basis?
Yeah, great questions. So first question is, in terms of how the revenue builds, are the initial projects typically smaller, and do they grow from there? And on the whole, I would say, we of course are targeting larger transformation deals and clients that are ready to make that sizable commitment from the get-go. But in reality, it typically starts with a smaller strategic engagement where we're looking at these broader problems with the goal of then identifying what the program needs to be in order to achieve the identified objectives. And then that's where it begins to expand. So it is a land and expand strategy from that standpoint. The bigger companies we work with, the easier it is to continue that revenue spend, because we can work, Citibank's one of our customers right now. We're doing significantly work in their treasury services unit, which is budgeted completely independently from the consumer side of their bank, for example. So within each BU, there's great business unit of these large enterprises, there's great opportunity, and so that's part of the strategy, is to move across those businesses once we get in there. And then your second question around talent, it's a key, big reason that we selected this brand, and the big reason why we've focused on the connective proposition is this is a talent game that we're playing. The best talent is going to win in this market. I believe this brand has some soul, and the people that selected it were one of those circles that I talked about earlier. It was representatives from each of the different businesses, and so there was a very bottom-up proposition in terms of how the brand was created. And so it's really important to us to build that employer brand over time. And recruiting in general it's part of the system, it's part of the machine for all these businesses. So we are looking to continue to optimize that by working closer together. But we know how to scale these businesses. We've been doing it. And so we'll just continue to get better at it as we grow. Yeah.
One of the slides you referenced the importance of partnerships in future, and I was unclear: is this a revenue opportunity or a skills opportunity or a cost opportunity? If you could expand a little bit on why that was a specific important point.
Yeah. So question is what the partnerships, whether it's a revenue or a skills opportunity, it's a little bit of both. So and partners are, so some of our strategic partners today are Apple and Google and Amazon and and those big companies I mentioned that are building a lot of these capabilities. But there's other specialist software vendors that are taking off, helping to provide infrastructure for a lot of the changes that these companies are looking to make. One example of that is a company called Pivotal. Pivotal is was majority owned by Dell EMC, and they just spun off and did their own IPO a couple months ago. But Pivotal became a partner over at Solstice as Solstice moved into cloud services. So something that Solstice hadn't done before was building software in the cloud. So they partnered up with Pivotal as they moved into that space, which allowed them to, one, bring Pivotal to our existing client base, but two, allow Pivotal to bring Solstice into their new opportunities. And that's become one of the fastest growing service offerings that Solstice has. And Solstice recently was awarded by Pivotal to be Agile Partner of the Year. So those things really, if it's a mutually beneficial arrangement, they can really accelerate growth for both businesses. We're looking to just do more of that in all three of those pillars.
Just one more question on returns to shareholders. You flagged here additional potential returns. Just sort of talk through the dividend policy now. Obviously, you've been through a big period of change. Businesses, digital print, marketing services business now moving on again. Can you just kind of put some context around that win and how we should think about the payout ratio, perhaps, or how you're going to look at it?
Yeah, well, in FY19, we've still got some deferred consideration to get through, but I think we've set out that we see ourselves as a growth stock, and we want to use our cash resources to continue to invest in the business. So that's how we view the dividend. We would prefer to use that cash to generate the growth.
Just one more. In terms of when you're going to market and going to your customers, is there any sort of pattern or whatever? Is it the CMO to the CTO? Who is it that the bulk of your business is going through now to get in the door?
Yeah, great question. So the question was in terms of the key customers or organizationally, where are we selling in? CMO, CIO, CTO? It varies. To be frank, obviously the communications portion of the pillar is very aligned to the CMO. But when we talk about strategy and innovation, different organizations assign ownership to the digital transformation agenda depending on what area of the business it's impacting. So in some businesses, like our financial services clients, it's very tied up with the COO and kind of the core offerings that they have. For other businesses, if they've got a very strong CIO, Chief Information Officer, or Chief Technology Officer that's driving the agenda, then we may be selling into them. And so it kind of depends on the business, because not every business, there's no blueprint right now for how businesses organize around transformation. It's a C-suite agenda that kind of spans across those offices, and so we're selling across the C-suite right now. Any other final questions? Well, thank you guys again for coming. Obviously, we'll be around for further conversations, and we appreciate your support. Thanks.